I'd like to talk to you today about the concept of a process owner. Um, this is a term that's thrown around quite a bit, but yet isn't really well understood. And I think the application of it is messed up or distorted many, many times. So let's start. What is a process owner? There's other terms for this: process captain, process champion. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can sort of term this, but fundamentally, they own the how, not the what of the process, but the how of the process. They own the sort of connected tissue about how the end-to-end process works. It's almost entirely, almost exclusively around cross-functional processes. If it wasn't a cross-functional process, it would just be a team doing their work and the manager would be the one accountable. So most of the time you need a process owner is because there's some cross-functionality to the work itself. Now, they work in that cross-functionality to clarify the roles across boundaries. They worry about misalignment between different functions and different roles, and they worried about the metrics, the shared metrics around what the whole process needs to deliver, especially when misaligned with sort of individual functional metrics. They really own the standard for the work across that process. Now, that doesn't mean they own the process for every element of the work. How one person does their piece of that process is kind of their standard. But the overall standard, especially the connective tissue, they own that standard. They also then own the updates or improvements to that standard. So when we have to make a change, make an improvement, change the standard, they have to own that part of the process. And essentially, they should respond to the abnormal conditions. When the process isn't working, they have to step in and help fix it, right? Whether it's short-term or long-term structural changes, it could be something that we have to engage role B, but role B no longer exists in the organization. Well, okay, we don't just stop. We have to redesign and reroute around that gap. So that's a bit about what is a process owner. So let's now talk about what it's not. What it is not is a project manager, driving the execution of that cross-functional process. They should not own that. They should actually, most days, they should not even have to pay attention to that process. This is almost never a full-time job unless it's owning multiple processes that happen to kind of fall together in a family. So most of the time, they're not even paying attention to the process because they don't own the execution of it. The process does, or project management does, or the handoffs in the individual execution does. So the execution is owned by the resources in the process itself. And their job in part is also not about managing those resources. They might be one functional leader in that cross-functional process, so they will still manage their resources, but they don't manage all of the resources across the organization. So what are the benefits? Why have a process owner? So partly it's because the glue, the connections, the white space in between one department and the next, these connection points, this white space is where things often have delays and breakages. Right? We get errors, we get delays, we get distortions, and we really have to ensure those connections work. But it's really hard just to be in charge of the connections, right? So it's kind of like being in charge of the space in between two cars. You control that by controlling the two cars. You can't just control the space itself. And so to control the connections, to have some standards around the connections, you still need that end-to-end process owner. You also establish or help signal a culture of collaboration. Now, if you're one single process owner in a sea of not having them, this probably isn't enough. But overall, an organization that puts in place process owners starts to build a culture of collaboration because they understand and they have people who are almost dedicated to making sure that one function works with another, that we're aligned, that we work together. And so the interventions, actions, words, deeds of that process owner helps establish that culture of collaboration. And also, they really help ensure the process integrity and the process improvement. There's been lots of times you'll pull a team together, design a cross-functional process, and then put it into place. And then from that day on, I'll say entropy sets in. It starts to deteriorate, deteriorate, deteriorate over time. And instead, it should get stronger and stronger. It should be its worst day and it should get better from there. And who's going to take care of that but a process owner, someone really responsible to make sure that we're moving along. Now, Leslie, who should you select as a process owner? This is very much not about a job title. This is just a role that you play. There's lots of times we have informal roles, sometimes formal roles that have nothing to do with your job title. Take any team, and there's probably a informal social coordinator. They just make sure that we all know where we're going for drinks after work or where we're going for dinner. And in some ways, it's like that, just a little bit more formal. Their power, the power of a process owner, doesn't come from positional authority. It really has to come from the culture itself, a culture of process ownership, cross functional collaboration, process focus, and improvement. So this isn't about power or control. This is about influence and through the role of the process owner. It's often based on one of the roles already in the process, right? You're already connected to it, you know something about it, you care about it. You might be at the very end of the process, and so everything feeds you. You might be in a role that sort of acts as a natural hub, everything coming in and out of your role. Um, or it could have nothing to do with what your role is. You just happen to be naturally suited. Your skills, your leadership attributes, the respect that the other members give you, puts you in a position where you can be a process owner working across those boundaries where people aren't worried that you're using your special power to gain for your own function. So there's no real hard and fast rule about who you select, but these are some of the guidelines. So process owners can be a powerful tool, usually not in isolation, usually as sort of an ongoing role, multiple people as different process owners of different processes across the organization. Then the organization gets to learn what that role is, how they operate, and ultimately, culturally, show the role the respect that it deserves and allows it to operate as it needs to. So I hope this advice helps you execute, design, deliver, run the role of a process owner effectively. I'd love to hear your tips and tricks. What have you seen work? What challenges do you face? And what are your best practices? So thanks and good luck.